So we're here to talk about Pararchive, which is an HRC-funded Connected Communities project, which is looking at developing online resources, open source resources for communities to use for digital storytelling, doing research, engaging with large institutions, museums and archives. And it's a partnership between the University of Leeds, University of York and Carbon Imagineering that Imran works with. And I'm Simon Popple, and my interest in relation to this really comes from my background in archives.
Well, you most likely don't know this, but I've actually hosted something like 50 of these talks myself, but never actually presented one. So I've gotten off this for years. But I was commissioned by Simon. I came out of Sue's Creative Labs program to develop the technology and design it.
Yeah, and the background for the project came from a previous project called Strike Stories, where I was working with the BBC, looking at how we could open up the BBC's archives of the miners' strike and allow people involved in the strike to use it as a basis for storytelling and for exploring their own histories. And so the project itself, and here's some of the sort of basic aims, came from this idea of trying to mechanise this process. So we worked very closely with a small group of people that was very labour intensive, and we wanted to do something digitally. We're working with a number of key institutional partners, so we're working with the BBC, who've got an immense archive, just an example, 400,000 programmes, 5 million photographs, and the Science Museum, who are also interested in how they can open up their own collections to public and develop impact from their own materials. So what we want to do is to design new tools and architectures for engaging with archives, encourage collaboration between institutions and communities, and to develop software interfaces that allow that to take place. And we're working with a number of communities. Brandeis Archaeology are a group of archaeologists working on the Isle of Bute. They're quite well developed. They've developed their own research plan for the island, and their partnering is on developing sort of storytelling around architectural sites on the island. We've got a group of people from Stoke who are loosely affiliated under the idea of ceramic city stories, who are interested in the idea of ecology, local geography, local history and industry. A group of DSLR filmmakers who are very interested in using the archive. So the focus for this group and the real impact for them is getting access to BBC materials that they can use in their creative projects. We're also working with a group of Arduino computer programmers in Manchester who are building an environmental radio which allows you to tune into the internet wherever you are, and you can draw down content from archives that are located in the place that you're actually in. So this is a really sort of exciting sort of set of people that we're working with. And I'm going to hand over to Imran to talk about the process.
So over the course of about 4 afternoons in 2012, Simon, myself and a couple of other designers basically brainstormed a few ideas for storytelling platforms, what kind of things we might want to do. And we arrived at a set of design principles that were really about trying to set the values of a potential project in the future. And a lot of that was to harness the kind of nature of the web and to build tools that orchestrated material that was already out there, rather than trying to invent something new. Once we'd kind of arrived at some, I guess, blueprints for what we might want to do, we started to work with real communities and hosted a series of co-design workshops that are actually still going on. And the kind of principle there was to work with communities rather than just kind of impose what we thought might be an interesting solution on them. So this involved a lot of paper prototyping, listening, actually compassion and care as kind of interesting design materials from our perspective. And looking to surface connections between stories that might otherwise appear to be quite static objects. So we arrived at the notion of what we call story blocks, essentially the anatomy of a story, the kind of places it takes place, characters, narrative flows and structures, and how we might be able to represent that digitally. So right now we're in the middle of testing a prototype, essentially a sketch of what we might do in the future, to test that concept with the community groups that we've been working with. They've designed it, so it's actually been quite well received by them. And we're kind of heading towards a beta release towards the end of the year. So the prototype has been very well received, we're testing it, but we're actually now looking at how we can kind of refine what we've put in front of users and help them explore some of the institutional archives that Simon talked about earlier. And I guess the ultimate aim is to have a kind of explorable story universe that's oriented around people, characters, places, and the kind of artifacts and objects that we might see in institutional collections. I'm ahead of myself, wow. Thank you.
Thank you.